All right, October 6th, left, right, out. Some, typically things are happening. News is always happening, but we'll start. I won't be here for the rest of the week. Going into the late next week, I got some things going on, but let's go ahead and kick it off in the markets. The biggest thing I've seen so far is oil sell off. A surprise U.S. build. I don't know if that's going to last. Unless there's some demand destruction there, because we're just not producing as much as we have been. Also, you got OPEC who they came out with their results. They're going to keep their projected output increase, and that starts in November. They'll start putting on a number of tens of, or I think it's hundreds of thousands of barrels. I think, or maybe weekly, but anyway, they're going to have a build, and we'll see how that plays out. The markets overall are down. They're calling a sell-off. It's not even like, what you got the Dow like down to 40 or whatever, the S&P. Like we're turning because there's a lot of uncertainty in the market, and we're going to see the VIX is up, moderately. Gold's been hanging out at 17, in the 1750s, between 1750 and 1800. It's just been hanging out, which is good buying opportunity, really. And it's a wealth holder, and not an investment, not a speculation. It's a way to hold wealth over the long term. And silver, 2250, 23. That looks pretty enticing as well. Just throw some money in there. You got the 10-year holding steady at 152. It's at that 1.5 level. Now, like I said yesterday, once you start getting that creeping up, then investors have to offset what the opportunity or like the risk parameters, because that is still looked at as the risk-free rate in a sense. I would argue that the U.S. debt is not risk-free, but relative to everything else. So you start looking at your investments into like the NASDAQ or whatever, and these tech companies in relation, the return you're getting there in relation to the return you could get just by holding U.S. debt. Those numbers, when they start converging, then you start seeing some interesting things happen in the market that isn't Federal Reserve, and they're buying things up, which they do have a trading desk, and it's interesting. Anyway, so we can go on to other stories. There was an interesting raid that I picked up on by the FBI in New York over there's an ongoing investigation, which there's not much details on. It's not the union, not the NYPD union, but there's like a sergeant's league of some sort. Look into it. I mean, I should have the information if I'm going to be talking about it on here, but just something to keep in mind, because it was pretty interesting. Apparently they raided a couple places, the FBI, and I was like, well, maybe they're actually doing something. Or the first thing that came to my mind, I know this is kind of conspiratorial, was like ever since the Wiener laptop thing, the NYPD has been like on the other side of the FBI pretty much. They've been at odds with each other over a few things. And the Wiener laptop thing, if you haven't heard, like originally the chatter or the scuttlebutt around there was that a number of these guys that actually seen it from the NYPD, because they're the ones that confiscated it, that some of the stuff on were so disgusting, and the FBI wasn't going to release it, that they kind of told the FBI that they don't come hell or high water, either you're going to do something about this or we're going to do something about it. And coincidentally, some of these people, there's supposedly a string of people that have died that have seen it on the NYPD, or inexplicably people that have died or committed suicide that were right there getting ready to retire. I don't know. I haven't really gone and validated that, but it's pretty interesting, and I wouldn't doubt it. So that was something to look into. There's also, so when I talked about yesterday, the DOJ being weaponized against families in North Carolina, or just in general, the deadly precedent this sets. Something has come to light regarding the Attorney General's family, who happen to be selling materials that are related to CRT, which might explain some of the aversion to parents speaking up against it, and why he would be more, apt to go after these individuals, or is because, hey man, he's got a little bit of indirectly a hand in the cookie jar when it comes to this kind of thing, which is I guess he has relatives, but I mean, there's a good story on Zero Hedge about it. I think it's actually been picked up by a few other organizations you could look into. That's something to check out, because that's interesting when it comes to the corruption in our government. I'm sorry, I'm looking at some headlines that I had pulled up here. Funny. I didn't even talk about this, but that "Let's Go Brandon" thing, which is hilarious. You need to watch that, where they're the gals interviewing the winner of this, NASCAR race, and the people behind them are chanting "F Biden" pretty much, and she totally. It's clear as day. Granted, I know in the moment sometimes you can hear different things, but she's interviewing them, and it's clear as day what they're saying, and she's like, "Can you hear the crowd?" Like they're saying "Let's go Brandon." So now there's a bunch of memes about it. It's hilarious, and that's not like an isolated incident. There's all over a bunch of college games, professionals, stadiums. There's people that are shouting, "F Joe Biden," and I don't know if that's a huge sentiment change. It would appear so, because that demographic, especially at the college level, would be leaning towards the left. Who knows what that actually means? Another thing, when you go into the sports deal. I'm not a fan of the NBA, but there's some of those guys that have actually came out and said some things that are pretty interesting, enlightening about mandates. But also, I find I always bring up some contradictions from the conservative point of view. That these guys, I remember just a few years ago them clamoring about the NFL being anti-American or doing certain things, and they weren't going to watch it and be a big boycott. And maybe a few people actually did, but now all I see posts about football teams again. Not to the same extent there was a couple years ago, but it seems like every time the NFL screws up and their main customer base, is typically conservative males, and those guys, oh, well, I'm not going to watch them anymore. And next thing you know, they're peeking through the door and they're back at it. It doesn't take more than a few weeks. They're back to watching it and promoting an organization that pretty much despises them or is playing into the woke agenda. So I don't understand it. I've given up sports pretty much. If they start pushing politics, I just give up on them. And I started seeing that because I like watching soccer tournaments sometimes, but then you start seeing all the people kneeling, and I used to like the women's soccer team, but it became more of a political agenda with them, and I just totally didn't. I stopped watching. I won't watch. I won't have anything to do with it. It's like, that's cool. You're entitled to your opinion, but I just don't want it pushed on me. And when I watch sports, if I do, I'm there to watch this competition and see these players' abilities. I'm not there for a political opinion. If I want to get ideology, I'll turn on a news organization or, can't find too many people on YouTube anymore, but turn on some kind of website to get it from a political commentator of some sort. But another thing we'll talk about, so this is cool because the cryptos are really exploding too higher. And I brought it up yesterday, and I've had some cryptocurrencies. I'm actually going to end up doing, I'm not going to bring it up here because I don't want anybody to take it as advice, but I'm going to start delving into a certain cryptocurrency. I already have in one for play money, like a few dollars here. And one, Shiba Inu, I want to bring them up because they've been skyrocketing the last few days, and that's one of those dog coins like Dogecoin. If you played on that, Shiba Inu I've watched the support levels. I've put I don't know, when it was really low, you can buy like a few 100,000 for like $6. And I was putting some money into that. So I've had, from earlier this year, I got a couple $100 on it. Just recently I started watching it again because all of a sudden it broke through these support levels, right? It looked like it was dead. Of course, it's a very young token. It's a token, not necessarily like a Dogecoin where you can mine it or whatever. This token, like they print out or they mint, in a sense, digitally, a certain amount of tokens. And then that's what's out there. So it's broken above some key support levels and establishing base. We got, in that they're getting ready to, there's chatter about listing on Robinhood. Well, I bring this up because this is like one of those speculations. I'm not saying go do this because this is purely speculation. I don't know what the use case is for it. But in this kind of frenzied, post-technical or post-fundamental analysis market, psychology plays more of a role. So if you get somebody tweeting something, people jump in with all this, excess liquidity going in these plays. So if you have the stomach to speculate on certain things, you could have a life-changing event. But you have to do it with money you're willing to lose. And but anyway, so this happens to be one of those. And you start building up this like cyclical momentum of media. And the same thing happened with GME, and people start getting in there, fear of missing out on this thing. And more, like I'm talking about it, so more and more media or more and more people mentioning it brings in more and more people, and next thing you know, this thing starts going through the roof against any kind of technical or fundamental analysis. And you just can't fight the trend. And we'll see what happens. It might be a Dogecoin. It might go from here. It might go to half a cent. If it goes to half a cent, man, that's incredible. Same with Dogecoin. If it goes back up, that'd be incredible as well for a lot of people that don't have that much money, and they just kind of like, this is an easy way to play a crypto because they don't have, well, you can buy, obviously small fragments of like a Bitcoin or Ethereum, but they might not have a few grand or whatever to put into this. So if you have like 10, 20 bucks on like a Robinhood app or Coinbase or a crypto app, crypto.com app, you can throw in 10, 20 bucks into like a Shiba Inu or a Dogecoin, and you can make a little money potentially. Like I said, this is purely speculation. There was a lot of things. Shiba Inu is on Coinbase. Like I said, there might be, if they go to Robinhood, holy moly, hold the phone. And you have some big buyers in there. And the interesting thing about cryptocurrencies is you can actually, unlike the stock market, which is really tough to see where the large money is flowing, you can figure it out. But on crypto, you can actually do a scan on the blockchain. You can see where these large purchases are in these ledgers. And people have noticed some of these big whales that have come in the Shiba Inu, and that's one of the reasons why you have this catalyst. And some people speculate it could be a Robinhood, or it could be some other whale. And if that's the case, it's some other whale. And then when Robinhood, if it gets it, they have to go into the market and purchase these, at least a base amount of this token, and they usually are not as price sensitive because they're going to turn around and that's going to be like that's their book that they're going to end up selling to their customers. So if it's not them and they come in, you're going to see another leg up on this thing. Who knows where the end is? I know people say, well, look at the market cap. It'd be impossible for them to do this. Well, nothing's impossible with fiat currency. Nothing's impossible with mass psychology and super liquidity in the markets. Like, you can have astronomical valuations. Now, are they true, or is it going to crash? Probably not. But if you speculate and you get in, and you can make some money. So that's my thing. That's my speculation of the day on this. Is some of these cryptocurrencies, especially these little ones, are popping again, and we'll maybe get another little frenzy, which would be interesting, right? Because that was pretty fun. That was life changing for a lot of people that had Dogecoin. And unfortunately, I had some at like 5 cents and sold it at 9, and it was just one of those things. And I could have changed my life. Same with AMC. I had AMC, under $9 before it went in, and I literally sold it the week before because I was like, oh man, I need this cash that I can use it for something else, and that would have been potentially life changing. Well, but you can't ever time things, and that was a purely speculative play, and it wasn't based really on too much of the fundamentals, besides the fact that we might be opening back up. But that market, when we look at the movie sector, has changed so much now that even if you're going to have people still go to the movie theaters, but there's a lot of people that you can get these things at home now. But that's a whole nother talk about that changing dynamic in that market. You have, in the crypto space, there's people that believe in it. Then you have, like I said, these speculators. So it's not a very stable market at the time. Bitcoin is kind of stabilizing. That's the most stable, sure coin that I can think of, and then Ethereum. But let's see. You got some short-term debt limit stuff going on, and we'll see if that goes. Like I said, debt limit's just like at this point, it's not. I can't even remember when the debt limit's actually played any kind of role where we've hit it and people haven't risen it. So it's like, what's the point of even having it at this point? I wish they would stay with it. And they, the other side, or the Biden's types, they've been lying to you to the fact, we're going to go bankrupt. It's like, well, you still got money coming in. You just have to prioritize your spending at that point. We can't afford your $3.5 trillion budget, without raising the debt ceiling, because we need the debt market for that. But on the other side of things, what did he say was it's going to net us $0? It's like, no, it's going to cost $3.5 trillion if you pass it. Probably more, to be honest, because you pass it, then you have to actually go out there and raise that money, whether it be through the tax system or through the debt markets. And I know the interest rates are rigged, but at the same time, if we start seeing spikes, that money might cost a lot more than we think. Another thing about that is they came out where they say that you might have, like I said, I brought up Yellen said about a recession. It's like, well, if the government spending is going to cause a huge recession, if we can't spend more exponentially, then what kind of economy do we have? Which in a debt-based system, educationally, we talk about this is like, well, it's relying upon ever increasing amounts of debt, because in reality, in the debt-based system, there's always going to be more interest due than the actual dollars out there. So, like I said, the Federal Reserve issues currency. Let's just say that let's go off that level, that base level, and not go into the fractional system, because that's even worse. But the Federal Reserve issues this currency, and that's the money. So they put out $1, but that dollar is also tied with some kind of interest. So where do you get that interest? That's what I'm saying, is that it's under the precept fact that you have to constantly have more and more debt. So inevitably these systems collapse, right? Regardless. So they think we have to, in order to pay our bills, we have to get on further debt, which complete insanity. They're also saying that this is in some kind of investment in America. I was like, here's the thing: if $3.5 trillion we're going to pass that, why don't you just cut us all a check for like, hey, if I was up there, here's what I would do. If I was like a Senator Rand Paul, or like, well, these originate in Congress, so I'd be like a Thomas Massey type. I would put just randomly in there, wherever, how many thousands of pages in there, and be like a random lottery, like Joe Bob in each county in my district would be like, okay, we're going to randomly give $1 million to this person. So like one day he might not even know, but one day he wakes up and the bill is passed and nobody's read, because nobody reads half of these. This is buried in there. One day a guy in each one of your counties or your district wakes up and he's getting $1 million check. Might as well, right? Because where else is this 3.5? Well, I'll tell you where it's going. A lot of it's going to people that have ties to various companies, or that have ties to various politicians. It's a corrupt business up there. These people get an ear. All you got to do is, just to get a little glimpse of the way it is, there was an interesting documentary that it actually followed, I believe, Congressman Massey and another Congressman, Gates, maybe, from Florida. And they talk about it like they're expected to do such and such when they're up there. These people are always around there doing this and that. And just, it gives you a little slight glimpse, not even the full glimpse, of the corruptibility of there. And it's funny because I've been around some of these people, and you see even the guys that are out of Congress and they're still around like their districts, like the people, and these aren't necessarily the money types, but the power they still hold, and the people that are following them around. Like I remember this one congressman that, because I ran for office one time, and I was he's a kind of not a pseudo family friend of my grandpa when he did some politics stuff on public land uses in the West. So if you go to like places like Colorado and you get to go on public land, a lot of those tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of acres, you can thank my family for, well, I don't want to say, but some of the reason why those are open and haven't been blocked off by illegal operations is because of my grandfather. But anyway, he's worked with these guys. So, but I got to see this gentleman, and he wasn't even in Congress anymore. But there's just all these people around him that are like, to me, it felt very dirty. Like there's just people suckling at the tit of some sort of residual political power that this gentleman wielded. And he was a super nice dude, I think. But that even the nicest guy that has that kind of, I would call him yes men around them, eventually lends himself, either he loses touch with reality or it lends itself to his own corruptibility. And corruption comes in many